The August sun beat down on the Montana Territory train depot like a hammer striking iron, and Reed Callahan felt sweat run down his spine as he stood waiting at the edge of the wooden platform. In his rough hands he held a small bouquet of prairie wildflowers, freshly picked that morning, already wilting in the heat. He had never carried flowers for anyone before, and the sight of them made him feel foolish, but he kept them anyway. Today mattered. The black locomotive roared closer, smoke rolling across the sky like a promise finally kept. For 6 long months, Reed had written letters to a woman named Eleanor Hartley, a schoolteacher from Philadelphia. Plain, practical, honest, exactly what a rancher like him needed. Her letters spoke of simple dreams, steady work, and a desire for a quieter life far from crowded cities. She sounded like someone who could survive Montana winters and long days of hard labor. Reed was 42 years old and had built the Broken Creek Ranch with his own hands. 3,000 acres, 200 head of cattle, a solid timber house with glass windows and real floors. What he did not have was a wife. No laughter in the evenings. No one to share supper with. No children to carry his name forward. So he had done what many men in the West did. He placed an advertisement and hoped. The train screamed to a stop. Steam flooded the platform, thick and white, hiding everything for a moment. Reed straightened his jacket, brushed dust from his sleeves, and tried to slow his breathing. This was it. Then the steam cleared. The woman who stepped down from the train was not Eleanor Hartley. Reed's heart dropped hard into his stomach. The woman before him was stunning in a way that made no sense out here. She wore a deep green silk dress that shimmered in the sunlight, fitted at the waist and trimmed with delicate lace. Kid leather gloves covered her hands. A wide hat crowned her head, decorated with ribbons and feathers that looked far too expensive for Silver Falls. She moved like someone who had never hauled water or scrubbed floors. Her skin was pale and smooth. Her auburn hair escaped in soft curls beneath her hat, and her face was beautiful in a way that stopped conversation around the platform cold. But it was her eyes that caught Reed's attention, golden, wide, terrified. She clutched a small beaded bag as if it were the only solid thing in the world. A porter followed behind her carrying 2 massive leather trunks that looked like they belonged in a city mansion, not a frontier town. People stared, whispered. Someone muttered that she must be lost. The woman's gaze scanned the crowd until it landed on Reed. On the lone man holding wildflowers like a fool, something passed over her face. Recognition, fear, acceptance. She walked toward him. Reed could not move, could not speak. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something floral and costly that made his head spin. "Mr. Callahan," she said softly. Her voice was smooth and refined, touched with a southern accent. "Reed Callahan of the Broken Creek Ranch." "Yes," he managed. She held out her gloved hand, formal and wrong in every way. "My name is Seraphine Locke. I believe you were expecting me." The world seemed to tilt. Reed's fingers tightened around the flowers until the stems bent. "I was expecting Eleanor Hartley," he said. "A schoolteacher." Color rushed into her cheeks. Her eyes dropped to the wooden planks beneath her feet. "Yes," she whispered. About that. Reed knew in that moment that nothing about his life was going to be simple anymore. He did not take her to the ranch. That decision came quickly and firmly. Whatever this was, it could not be settled in front of half the town. He directed the porter to take her trunks to the hotel and led her there himself, the sound of whispered gossip following them down the street. They sat across from each other in a small private dining room. Reed set the wildflowers on the table between them, already drooping. "Start talking," he said, "and tell me the truth." Seraphine removed her gloves. Her hands shook. At her wrist, Reed caught sight of a fading bruise. "My name is Seraphine Locke," she said quietly. "That part is true. I am not Eleanor Hartley. She was my companion. She wrote the letters. She sent her photograph. The plan was for me to become her by the time I arrived." Reed leaned back in his chair, anger and disbelief battling in his chest. "Why?" Her voice cracked. Because I was desperate. Because I had debts. Because men were hurting me when I could not pay. Because I needed somewhere safe. Silence filled the room. Reed stood and turned toward the window, staring out at the town he had built his life around. He had ordered a plain, honest bride. Instead, fate had delivered a frightened woman wrapped in silk and secrets. And now he had a choice that would change everything. He could send her away, or let her stay. And he had no idea which choice would destroy him. Reed paid for Seraphine's room at the Silver Creek Hotel for the week and left town before sunset, riding hard back to the Broken Creek Ranch with his thoughts tangled tighter than barbed wire. He told himself he had done the right thing. He had given her money, protection, and a way out. Whatever trouble followed her had no place in his life. Yet the ranch felt different that night. Too quiet, too empty. The wind moved through the grass like a voice asking questions he did not want to answer. Reed drank his coffee cold and stared at the dark, seeing golden eyes instead of fence lines. Seraphine spent that first night sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the money Reed had given her. It was more than she had seen in years. It could buy her a ticket east and a chance to disappear, but when she closed her eyes, she saw the disappointment on Reed's face and felt the weight of what she had done settle deep in her chest. Running again felt like dying slowly. The next morning she went to the church. The white clapboard building sat quiet in the early light. Seraphine nearly turned back twice, but she forced herself forward and knocked. Sarah Blackwood, the minister's wife, answered. Her eyes were kind but sharp, the eyes of a woman who had survived hardship without losing herself. "I'm looking for work," Seraphine said simply. "Any kind of honest work." Sarah studied her, the fine dress, the careful posture, the fear hidden behind control. "Can you read and write?" "Yes." "Teach children?" "I can learn." That was enough. By noon, Seraphine stood in front of 6 children in a small schoolroom, her heart pounding harder than it had on the train platform. They stared at her openly. Some whispered. One boy laughed when she stumbled over chalk dust. She did not run. She taught them letters and numbers the way she had learned, with stories and patience. When she failed, she tried again. By the end of the day, her feet ached, her throat burned, and her dress was smudged with chalk. It was the most honest exhaustion she had ever known. Days passed. Seraphine returned to the church school each morning. She cleaned floors. She scrubbed ink from desks. She learned to bake bread with Sarah, burning 2 loaves and laughing through the shame. Her hands blistered. Her pride cracked. Something stronger grew beneath it. The town watched. Some whispered cruelly, others waited, a few nodded in quiet approval. Reed came into town once a week for supplies. He did not seek Seraphine out, but he saw the signs. Children laughing as she walked past. Sarah Blackwood greeting her by name, a faint bruise of flour on her sleeve. He told himself it meant nothing. Still, he noticed. Then the storm came. It rolled in fast from the north, black and furious. 3 children from the McCready Ranch went missing that afternoon, caught checking traps too far from home. Panic spread through Silver Falls like fire in dry grass. Men saddled horses. Women prayed. Seraphine heard the shouting and ran toward it without thinking. She knew the children. She had taught them. When the search parties formed, she stepped forward. "I'm coming," she said. Reed was already mounted when he saw her, wet hair pulled back, dress torn at the hem, fear in her eyes and fire beneath it. "This is dangerous," he said. "So is staying behind," she answered. They rode together into the storm. Rain turned to sleet. Wind screamed through the trees. They found the children huddled in an old root cellar, shaking and crying. Seraphine climbed down first, wrapping the smallest child against her chest, murmuring soft words until his sobs eased. Reed broke down the door wider and hauled the others out. They rode back soaked and freezing, but alive. That night, word spread faster than the storm ever had. Seraphine sat by a fire in the McCready cabin, trembling from cold and release. Reed watched her quietly. He saw the bruises on her hands, the steadiness in her movements, the way the children clung to her without question. She was not the woman who had stepped off the train. Days later, another test came. A woman went into labor at a remote ranch. The midwife was gone. The doctor was old and needed help. Someone remembered that Seraphine had studied medical texts. Someone else said she had steady hands. She went. Blood, screams, fear thick in the air. Seraphine followed instructions, held strong, pushed past terror. When the baby cried, strong and alive, Seraphine sank to the floor and wept with relief. The town did not whisper anymore. They spoke her name with respect. Reed heard it all. He came to the church one quiet afternoon and found her alone, sweeping the schoolroom. She looked up, startled. For a moment, neither spoke. "You didn't leave," he said. "No," she answered. "I stayed." He looked at her carefully, really looking this time, at the worn dress, the tired eyes, the strength that had replaced fear. "I was wrong about one thing," Reed said. "You're not useless." Seraphine swallowed. "I'm still learning." "So am I," he said. Outside, the Montana sky stretched wide and blue. Two people stood in a small schoolroom, both changed, both uncertain, and both facing a truth neither had expected. This story was not over. Silver Falls changed quietly after that. No one announced it, no one made speeches, but doors opened easier for Seraphine now. Greetings lasted longer. Children ran to her without hesitation. Women asked her questions, then trusted her answers. The town had watched her fail, work, bleed, and stand back up. That mattered more than where she came from. Reed tried to stay away. He told himself he had made his choice weeks ago, that his life was simple again. Ranch, cattle, work, silence. But the silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt unfinished. On a Sunday morning, Reed went to church for the first time in months. He sat in the back, hat in his hands, listening without hearing much at all. When the service ended, children rushed past him, laughing. Seraphine followed, helping the smallest one with a loose shoe. She looked up and saw Reed. They stood there, the space between them filled with everything they had not said. "You stayed," Reed said again, as if the words still surprised him. "I found something worth staying for," she replied. They walked outside together, not touching, not rushing, just talking about the ranch, about the school, about mistakes that still hurt and lessons that stayed. "I was wrong," Reed said finally. "I thought I needed someone already shaped for this life. I didn't see that life does the shaping." Seraphine met his eyes. "I was wrong too. I thought I had to lie to survive. Turns out honesty was harder. And better." The next week, Reed asked her to walk with him after supper. The town noticed. They always did. This time, the looks were softer, curious instead of sharp. They talked. Slowly, carefully, Reed showed her the ranch, the house he built with his own hands, the land that tested him every season. Seraphine listened and imagined, not with fear, but with quiet courage. "I won't promise you an easy life," Reed said. "I don't need easy," she answered. "I need real." Winter came early that year, harsh and unforgiving. Seraphine learned to break ice from water barrels, learned to bake bread that fed more than pride, learned how silence could be full when shared. Reed learned too. He learned patience when she failed, trust when she tried, joy in watching someone become strong instead of expecting strength from the start. In spring, Reed stood in front of the church with Seraphine beside him and spoke clearly so there could be no doubt. "I am asking this woman to be my wife, not because she fits a plan, but because she earned her place in my life." Seraphine said yes with steady hands and clear eyes. Their wedding was simple. Wildflowers. Sunlight. Honest vows spoken without fear. The town gathered not out of curiosity but pride. They had watched this story grow from its broken beginning. Marriage was not magic. Seraphine struggled. Reed stumbled. But they faced it side by side. She became a teacher, a healer, a ranch wife who knew how to work and when to rest. Reed became a husband who listened and learned and loved without control. Years later, when travelers passed through Silver Falls, they heard the story. About the cowboy who ordered a plain bride. About the wild woman who arrived instead. And about how both of them were changed forever because neither one ran when things went wrong. Some stories begin with